Hello and welcome to Dead Times, the only horror movie podcast recorded in the backseat of a police car pulled over on the side of the road. I'm your host.
Hey, um,
I'm your host Peter, and with me, as always, is the guy whose dorm room I wake up in every morning, Tim. Tim, how you doing?
I'm doing just fine. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about Happy Death Day, which is our first current release movie. Um,
I have a good feeling about about this,
yeah.
about this idea.
So, what'd you think about it?
Okay, okay. I have a thing. Um, my initial thoughts on it are that if you, the listener, if you have kids, and your kids play video games or watch Let's Plays, um, which means that they've already digested a certain amount of stylized violence and strong-ish language, whether you realize that or not. If you have kids who do those things, take them to see this movie because this is this is a family movie, is what it really is. This is one of the most wholesome, positive, unnihilistic movies I've seen in a movie theater in a good while.
Yeah,
Um,
this is a
there is
PG.
nothing disturbing about it. There is nothing um, very frightening about it. It's at its best, it's mostly just kind of adorable.
Yeah, this is a PG-13 movie, and PG-13 horror is sort of its own beast. Um, and there have been a lot of great PG-13 horror movies. The Ring, of all things, is PG-13. Drag Me to Hell is PG-13. Um, but there have been a lot of terrible PG-13 horror movies, and usually what happens is that a studio sees an R-rated horror movie and thinks it can be more profitable by making it PG-13, and so they cut out a whole bunch of stuff. But I think PG-13 horror movies that are written and tended to be PG-13 horror movies are actually can be very successful, and I think this movie succeeds in what it sets out to do.
I agree. And yeah, and it doesn't feel like the material doesn't suit the rating. I mean, honestly, I mean, I think you could make this story kind of work with a PG.
Yeah,
Like it's that sort of uh, uh, I don't want to say tame. Tame is not the right word, but it's not a horrifying movie
yeah,
in almost any respect.
yeah. It is. Well, it's soundly in the realm of horror comedy, um,
Sure.
and it sort of occupies the same space that, for example, Gremlins 1 does, and
Mhm.
then Gremlins 2 really does. Um, where, like, okay, yes, there are these horror elements, but there's a lot of using those horror elements to make jokes.
Yeah, yeah, and I'd agree with that. Yeah, it's almost closer to like the original Ghostbusters in a weird way. Like not tonally really, but just in terms of the balance between horror and comedy. Because there's some kind of freaky shit in Ghostbusters, but it's never the focal point of the movie. Really,
Hmm.
is be creeped out by this.
Yeah.
Uh, as opposed to the other end of that spectrum would be something like Shaun of the Dead, which is legitimately intense in a lot of respects,
Yeah. Um,
while being a comedy.
but uh, I, the more I think, like, I personally, at first, the first after I watched it initially, I was sort of like on the fence about whether or not I liked it. But the more I've sat there thinking about it, the more I've come to really appreciate it and really just sort of enjoy some of the creative things it does.
Hmm.
Um, and in
Which
particular,
is saying something for what is fundamentally a very unoriginal movie.
yeah, well, it's unoriginal enough that they call it out for how unoriginal it is. Um,
Which I had mixed feelings about.
I know. Well, I personally, the scene where they talk about Groundhog's Day comes is the very last scene. Like, I think that scene should have been moved somewhere in the middle.
See,
Um,
I disagree. I think that's the only way that made it work. I think the fact that they squeezed it in as kind of a last minute little throwaway thing is the only thing that kept me from being, oh fuck you. Do you even know you're doing this? Um,
but
but I think where it is, it gets away with it.
yeah, it definitely is drawing a lot of inspiration from Live, Die, Repeat / Edge of Tomorrow. Um,
I still haven't seen actually.
it's the
I've
Tom
been
Cruise, yeah, it's the Tom Cruise movie where he dies every day and then wakes up the next
Yeah,
morning.
yeah, I heard it was great. I heard it. It was really, really good.
Oh, it is really, really good. If you haven't seen, listeners, if you haven't seen Live, Die, Repeat / Edge of Tomorrow, go see it immediately because it is legitimately a great movie. It's obviously drawing a lot from that, Groundhog's Day, although it does push the concept forward in that the main character Teresa who goes by the name Tree uh, is getting weaker every single manifestation of this day. Um, so she's only they put a ticking clock on it, even if every day resets. Um,
Yeah, yeah, and that's refreshing. Even that they don't do a whole lot with that,
mhm,
um, but it's something different,
mhm,
and it makes the mechanics of the premise a little different. So I did appreciate that.
yeah. Um, it's not she can't just continuously relive this day, which is what Groundhog's Day is premised on, that there might never be an end to this day. And then uh, Edge of Tomorrow.
And also here it's more obvious, at least in kind of an abstract way, how to break the cycle.
Mhm,
That it is that she has to not be killed.
mhm,
That if our main character figures this out, which she doesn't really have anything to go on, but it's what she's working with throughout the majority of the movie, and it turns out to be right. Is if she can prevent herself from being murdered, then the day won't reset.
mhm.
Which Phil in Groundhog Day doesn't have at all. He just kind of has to intuitively put together that he has to become a better person.
Yeah. Okay, and I'd like to talk a little bit about the characters, but before we get to Tree, I'd like to talk about two other characters first. What'd you think about Carter?
I'm gonna make my viewing buddy unhappy because my best friend Josh saw this movie with me and really disliked it, and in particular disliked Carter. So Josh, if you're listening, I apologize. I really liked Carter, um, or at least I liked the role that he served in the movie. He's not the most compelling character on his own, um, but I like that he was in the movie. If that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean,
I
Carter,
liked that he was
Carter,
very genuine and supporting presence.
yeah, Carter's role is just to be the nicest guy on the planet and to accept the fact that Tree tells him something that's completely bonker balls. And every single time to, instead of being like, you trifling hoe, you crazy bitch, and running away, he helps her out as her sounding board as she's figuring out how to deal with every day being murdered and then the day restarting.
She wakes up. Your plan sucks. What do you mean? What are you talking about?
Yeah. And like I appreciated that character and like I don't know how invested I was in Tree and Carter's romance, but
Well, nobody else in the movie gets to have an arc
mhm,
because everybody else resets.
mhm. And
So their relationship only develops in terms of how Tree views it.
mhm,
As far as Carter is concerned, they're starting from the same place every time.
yeah.
So you're not really. I think you're not really supposed to be invested so much in their relationship so much as Tree's feelings towards him. You can't really be invested in them as a couple.
Yeah, and one of the things that which plays into uh sort of their relationship and think that I appreciate is that the movie sets up that it isn't merely every time Tree gets murdered, she uh resets, but anytime that she dies, it resets. Period.
Yeah,
And
yeah, like
so
there's one time where she just gets hit by a bus.
yeah, and so during the day, the iteration of the day where Carter dies, she very deliberately resets the day, knowing that if she survives that night, it's obviously not going to reset, or at least she doesn't think it will reset, and so she hangs herself, um, which I thought was very cute.
Yeah, I thought that was a really kind of small stroke of brilliance
Mhm,
from a storytelling perspective.
mhm,
As it kind of dawned on me where that scene was going, I was like, oh, that's really cool.
mhm. Yeah.
And it's a good way of using the speculative premise to signify character growth, which
Mhm,
is what this thing is supposed to be about.
yeah. Now the other character I'd like to talk about is Danielle, the president of the sorority.
Okay.
That character is amazing. That character gets one of the
Well,
two.
our actual viewers won't get this since the episode never made it out, but she's the Alfred of this movie.
Mhm, yeah,
She steals every scene she's in.
yeah. She gets one of the two best lines in the entire movie, which is "Deja vu is someone thinking about you while they're masturbating. I have it like 5 times a day." And
Uh,
I could not love her relationship with Tree anymore because they seem to openly loathe each other and yet hang out like throughout the movie.
yeah, which is what college is, as far as I understand.
Yeah, which they seem to, and they have like legitimate reasons for loathing each other because a minor plot point is the fact that at some point Tree hooked up with Danielle's boyfriend or person that she was interested or something, and yet they're still like constantly hanging out and it's so mean. They just rip into each other.
Um, and Danielle like goes beyond being a stereotype into this sort of pure, crystallized, realer than real version of just a mean girl sorority bitch.
Yeah.
Like it goes because there are characters in this movie that are pretty thinly written sort of archetypes, but she like goes beyond that into this kind of fundamental avatar of that entire archetype.
Uh, the scene where Danielle is reaming the one sorority girl for having lunch. Oh, that is.
Just for having lunch, just for eating actual food.
And the thing is that her lunch, like, if you actually pay attention to what she has, is not anything that you would be. Like, the point that they're trying to make is that they don't. Or is that uh, this girl is, like, basically pigging out. But, like, if you actually look at her lunch, it's like a salad and chocolate milk.
Yeah.
And Danielle acts like she literally just slit someone's throat and threw it on the table. It is
What the?
hilarious.
But she doesn't say that because it's PG-13 and they only get one.
Yeah.
Later,
Oh.
which is well utilized. Um,
and of course we mentioned that at one point Tree gets hit by a bus. She gets hit by the bus because she and Danielle are having a street fight.
yes.
It's so good. Oh, like Danielle, yeah, Danielle definitely steals every scene she's in. Like she is the avatar of mean bitch. Um, as far as these type of movies go, like she is every single horror movie mean girl rolled into one deeply
Superimposed on top of each other.
who I don't think she says a nice thing to any person over the course of the entire movie.
No, but at the same time, like it's not annoying when she's on screen, which is kind of amazing. You know
Yeah,
that it leans so hard into it that every time she's on screen, like, oh hooray, Danielle's back.
I know.
What horrible thing is she going to do to somebody now?
Yeah,
Um,
like she is.
shit.
I said she's awesome. She is. She steals every. You said it. She steals every scene she's in, and she provides a wonderful contrast for how Tree is sort of developing, of course, over the course of the movie, is how close she is versus how far she is from where Danielle is.
Yeah,
Um, and
yeah, pretty much.
like I said, that is an epic character. Um,
Yeah, she's the Steven Universe fusion of all three of the Heathers from Heathers.
Pretty much. Um, all
Go
right.
see this movie.
Yeah, I would highly recommend this movie. Like, I enjoyed it more than I felt I would, and more than I probably should have. All right, so let's talk a
Yeah,
little bit.
I'm recommending it too, although I'm not entirely sure how much of my recommendation comes from. I don't know, because this a lot of things about this movie are really goofy,
Mhm,
and I think that it's mostly self-aware
mhm.
about that, but I'm not sure. I might have to see it again to figure out uh, if it's aware of all of the ways in which it's a really ridiculous movie.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, I mean, the killer's mask is a giant baby's face, so I think we're a little bit aware of how goofy everything is.
yeah,
And
no, yeah, and that's what I'm saying.
and there's one of my favorite scenes of the movie is when Tree is about to have sex with Nick, and he puts on disco music, or no,
Yes.
he puts on EDM, a disco ball, and is dancing for a solid like 5 minutes in the background.
What is wrong with you, dude? This was all the stuff that you know, this is all designed um for helping to assist you get to the point that you're already at. You know, it's like that scene in Firefly where they have the whole the crew has the whole story rehearsed for them to bluff their way into the hospital, but they just get let in, but they still feel like they should say all of the story anyway. It's like, dude, you're already about to get laid. You don't need to do any of this.
Yeah, like maybe it's just that I have a fondness for white boy dancing, but I could have watched that for hours. Um, but all right, so let's talk a little bit about Tree. Um, she's
Who
actually she's not
I think is played by an actress that I know.
she's played by Jessica Routh. Um, first off, I have to call out the fact that Jessica Routh does an amazing job in this movie.
Holy
Like
shit. This
she,
movie would work if she were not at the center of it.
yeah,
Like if you didn't have someone as good as her at the anchoring this movie, like this would be a mess.
yeah, she is a very gifted at comedy, and
Yes,
she is uniquely gifted at saying mean things in a very upbeat, positive way. Um, and like she can really sell sort of some of Tree's more eccentric qualities. Um,
absolutely.
Before this, she was most famous for being one of Emma Stone's roommates in La La Land. Um,
Oh man, I've seen La La Land and I didn't remember that. I was thinking is there's if it's not her, it's somebody who looks a lot like her, plays a supporting character in iZombie. Um,
yeah, that's definitely not her.
it looked a lot like her. I don't know, but regardless, uh,
She is so good in this role. Like as good as Rachel Matthews is as Danielle, she is as good at being Tree, and she can absolutely sell the evolution of
there's more
Tree.
to Tree than being Danielle.
Yeah, Jessica Routh sells the evolution of Tree um, across the entire movie, and she, yeah, she deserves all the praise in the world for making this movie work. Um,
Absolutely, and I think that her arc in it is absolutely the best thing about the movie, and it's the thing that is executed with the most sincerity.
mhm,
Um, you know, which is kind of why I was saying like, this is almost really hard to call a horror movie. Is that all of the elements, or even a traditional slasher movie, because all of the elements that make it a slasher movie are played very tongue in cheek,
mhm.
but the character growth that she goes through is played very genuinely, and it's legitimately really sweet as it starts to finish that off, and it makes you really root for this character.
Yeah.
Not just to survive, but to overcome a lot of the stuff that she's struggling with.
Yeah. See, the interesting thing for me as a longtime horror fan is that Tree across the movie sort of comes to sort of embolize a whole bunch of different horror movie archetypes. Like she starts off as being the mean bitch who dies, who's the first one dead. The character
Right.
that all the other characters call out for being a quote mean bitch unquote. Um, and then eventually she becomes the hysterical woman who loses complete control over her senses, and she becomes the smart girl who has a plan, and then she eventually winds up as the final girl who is sweet and innocent and saves the day. And I thought that was very clever how they seeded that into the movie, that that Tree is sort of moving along the horror movie archetype chain, sort of further away from the character who dies first.
Yeah, until she becomes the character who lives.
Exactly. Um,
I didn't even think about that, but yeah, and that's a really smart way of using sort of the metatext of the horror movie genre
mm-hmm.
To highlight the character growth, because that's sort of legendary, is that all of the most unlikable characters die off, and it's the and there are movies that don't do that, obviously, but it's the rule to be broken.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the one or two really genuinely likable characters make it to the end, and all of their asshole friends are picked off one by one. That's the basic template for a slasher movie, at least. And so, if you want to tell a story about how somebody goes from being kind of a self-absorbed bitch to being a really developed and compassionate human being, then you can show them moving from one archetype to the other.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. I didn't think about it from that angle, but you're right.
Which I think it is because horror movies obviously do trade in these archetypal characters, and like if you watch Friday the 13th, there's a point where every movie has sort of a girl that's mean for no particular reason, and no one's really it's never really properly explained why she's hanging out with the rest of the group. And again, she gets regularly called the bitch. And the audience is sort of embracing an inner misogynistic streak to watch her get her comeuppance by being stabbed to death. And Tree really does start off embodying that character. Because one of the first things she does after her first day ends with her murder. On her second day, one of her first things is sleeping with the guy that Danielle is interested in a second time.
Yes.
Literally while texting Danielle that she's of course not doing it.
Yeah.
That's our main character and sort of where we start off. And
that is exquisitely unlikable behavior.
Yeah, which and again by the sort of puritanical standards that most horror operates in, she's sexually active, she wants sex, she's after sex. It turns out that
Driven snow.
Yeah, it turns out that she and Carter did not have sex the night before her birthday. But she is convinced for most of the movie, or for at least a good portion of the movie, that they did. And she doesn't seem to have any regrets about that fact.
Aside from occasionally acting pissed towards him because of it.
Yeah. And, yeah, so she is that first person who gets killed because she's a mean, nasty woman. And, well, obviously she is the first person that gets killed in this movie because she's the only person that gets killed in this movie. Or at least the only person who gets killed Well, a couple of the characters get killed and then get brought back to life, whereas she gets killed over and over and over again. Um,
She's the only character who gets killed more than once in this movie.
yes. uh, and then sort of we go through all these different iterations of her as she explores what it means to basically live the same day over and over and over again, with it always ending in her death. Um, one of the and my biggest complaint about the movie is that there's sort of a truncated middle section of this where she tells Carter what's happened, and Carter tells her, well, she has unlimited time to investigate her own murder. That um, she can basically launch a huge, or that she can follow all these people and figure out um, what their deal is, basically.
Mhm.
And I really wish they had beefed up that particular section, because I find that to be one of the more interesting elements of the film. Is
Yeah,
that
and it's mostly just one montage.
yeah, and she sort of has all these revelations about people that she thought she knew. Um, and it's also, again, very comical about the fact that she can narrow people off the suspect list by either if they got killed by the killer or if she got killed by the killer while watching them. Um, and
Yeah.
it is sort of one of the more high comedy uh, bits. Like she is watching Tim, the guy who she went on one date with and is stalking her, quote unquote, um, watching him masturbate to gay porn. Um,
Yeah.
she uses night
Which,
vision.
which has a really sweet payoff later.
Yeah, she gets night vision goggles and stalks the wife of the professor she's been sleeping with. Um,
I forgot about that. Yeah.
yeah, it's really really just fun stuff. Um,
And I kind of wish there was more of that.
yeah,
I agree. My biggest issue was that I felt like the last 10 minutes or so of the film felt really kind of tacked on.
hmm
Um,
yeah. This
which
isn't.
is not it's not a problem that I had in particular with the twist. I think that was a fine enough twist, but I just felt like the place where it fake ended worked too well as an actual ending
Yeah,
that that I couldn't have any response when it turned out that the movie was going to carry on, other than, oh, really?
yeah.
Like that was such a good way to end it, and
Mhm.
we're not going to end it that way.
This is a movie with a bunch of conclusions, and which I will give it to its credit, that you feel like Tree, in that you feel like the movie's over and then it just restarts again. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah. So so you empathize with that character.
mhm. Well, and the thing that I really liked about it is that throughout the movie, there'd been this whole thing about how Tree's mother was dead, and she was like avoiding talking to her father, and she talked about how they had the same birthday, and it's all left very ambiguous about the situation that killed her mother. And then she sees sort of a news report about a guy who murdered a bunch of women, and then freaks out and immediately assumes that he's the one that's been killing her. And like I was sitting there waiting for the revelation that, oh, he had killed her mother and knew her. Um,
Hmm.
which
I wasn't, but I can see how they could have gone that route.
well, like, see, the thing is, that is the storyline from Scream.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, is that
I've not
the
seen
main
Scream.
the main character Sydney's Prescott's mother got murdered, and sort of all these murders that happen are seemingly related to her mother's murder. And so I was sitting there like going, oh, well, this is what we're watching, is that he's coming after her, and it's because this movie um, is not really an homage to slasher movies from the '80s, but it's very much an homage to sort of Scream and that movie's descendants and the horror genre. Um, and like I thought the revelation that, oh, uh, well, we just none of that had anything to do with anything, and it was yet another red herring, uh, actually really worked for me.
I can see that. I can see, yeah, and it's not even the fact that that our guy, not Russ Thorne, didn't turn out to be the killer. It's just that it's more that that day didn't turn out to be the last day.
Yeah, because she does
of her ordeal, because that was the best one.
Yeah, she does. She explicitly does the Phil thing from Groundhog Day, where she makes the perfect day,
Yeah.
and like literally everything about that day is perfect.
Unlike Groundhog Day, it's not to impress anybody else. It's just because she realized that she could be a better person.
Yeah, she signs the Save the Earth petition. She warns the people about the sprinklers. She puts the pillow under the head of the fainting frat boy. She helps
Gives Tim really good advice.
She helps Tim come out of the closet. She helps the girl who just wants to eat lunch at the sorority.
She says hi to the anime girl.
Mm-hmm. Like she does everything. She does everything right. She does everything perfect, and then, nope, she gets reset.
Yeah.
And I think, like,
and I get it was supposed to be frustrating, but at the same time, when she woke up in the dorm again, I was like, really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I guess we have more movie, and the rest of the movie was fine. Although even I think the actual climax of the movie is even goofier than the rest of the movie.
Oh, the climax!
Like,
the climax is amazing.
Some of that dialogue is a little indefensible.
Well, shall we talk about the climax?
Yeah, let's do. We haven't avoided spoilers for the rest of this podcast, so
yeah.
See why we should. And also, like, this is not in a lot of ways not the most unpredictable movie.
Yeah. So in the climax of the movie, it turns out that she puts together that her roommate Lori is the one that has been killing her all these different days. And that her roommate's initial plan was that she would give Tree a poisoned cupcake. But then once the fact that Tree kept never eating the cupcake caused her to put on the mask and keep stabbing her to death. Day after day after day. And then, of course, they have a knockdown, drag-out fight in the middle of their dorm room, which ends with Tree shoving the cupcake into Lori's mouth and then leaping onto the chandelier and kicking her out the window.
Spectacularly plummeting from the window, Stephen King style.
Landing right in front of the anime girl who's listening to music outside.
Who never did anything to anybody.
No, she was only pleasant and smiled and waved. You know what? Good for that girl.
Yes.
I hope she's the star of Happy Death Day 2.
That girl didn't need a crazy Kafkaesque existential quandary with her getting murdered countless times, and just in order to be nice.
Yeah, she was already nice. But you know what? Let's find out what her deal is anyway.
We're already nice.
But yeah, so what'd you think about that revelation?
Again, I don't think it's bad as a revelation. I think if I saw it again, then I would mind it less knowing that it was coming, oddly enough.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's dumber as a twist than a plot point.
Mm-hmm.
Because it turning out that it was her roommate is fine. There's nothing wrong with that as a story. I just felt like as a twist, it kind of came out of nowhere a little bit. And that character I don't think had been built up a whole lot. Although maybe that's because I wasn't looking for it. So I think that's something that'll play better on second viewing. Should that ever happen.
She appears regularly throughout the movie, but like part of the point of her is that she doesn't make much of an impression, so that you're surprised at the end. And then also the cupcake appears regularly throughout the movie, in various iterations of the day. And again, you don't really pay attention to it until you've seen it twice, I think. Like, you're not tracking the cupcake your first viewing.
No. But yeah. As a twist, as something that is the twist, I think it's fine. I don't. But it's not great. I don't think it's the best quality in the movie. Is holy shit, this twist at the end that puts everything in a different perspective. Like
Yeah,
I think the movie's strengths are really the other stuff that it has going on.
yeah. This is
And
definitely not the. This
that's the
is
thing is that her defeating defeating her roommate doesn't really tie in with her character arc very much.
mhm,
Um, it's like, hey, actually, she realizes that by being a mean bitch and refusing to eat the cupcake that her roommate made for her, she was actually doing the right thing in
mhm,
that case.
yeah,
That if she had been a more supportive and nice roommate, then she would have died. I mean, she would have still died, rather.
yeah. Well, she would have died earlier in the day.
Yes, she would have died earlier in the day.
Mhm,
Um, and so yeah, I guess that's what bothered me about it is that it didn't seem it seemed um, like we had this nice arc going forward that seemed really completed um, in synchronization with her overcoming not Russ Thorn, um, and then there was just an extra 10 minutes of plot that
mhm,
didn't really have a lot to do
mhm,
with her character arcs. That bothered me a little bit. And I think that there could have been a smoother way to make that transition because that had studio note written on it a little
mhm,
bit. I felt, the like hey, because this is the thing that slasher movies do is they end a little bit after you're supposed to think they end, so
mhm,
we gotta do this.
mhm.
Um, but again, maybe it'll play less that way when I see it again when I know it's coming. Might feel more congruous with the rest of the movie.
Yeah. So
What are your
uh, I think that I think that the end kind of had to be that way because otherwise they would just be doing Groundhog Day. Like if it ended with her having the perfect day, then that's exactly how Groundhog's Day ends. So I think they had to do something different with the ending. Um,
yeah,
but
see that? Um,
I definitely wish that she would have had just replicated her perfect day, that second ending point, instead of freaking out.
yeah, or something,
Hmm.
and it's all right where it ends because it implies okay because she went through all that growth. She didn't make that day perfect, but she'll be a better person going forward
Yeah.
and make all the better relationships in a way that is not dependent on on
Hmm.
being a situational time lord.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean,
but But yeah,
she's.
if you're gonna do something to make it not just Groundhog Day, then have it be something that still has to do with the meat of the movie. Because if
Mhm.
it feels tacked on, then I think that just calls all the more attention to how much the movie up to that point was basically just Groundhog Day.
Yeah. Um,
That it feels like and if it didn't do that, then it could have leaned into it more like how it did in that last conversation. We're like, hey, you know what this reminds me? This whole thing reminds me. It reminds me of Groundhog Day. Um, like if they leaned into that more, then I would have been more willing to accept it. It's like, okay, yeah, this is basically just Groundhog Day, but it's this fun version of Groundhog Day
mhm,
where it's also a slasher movie.
mhm.
Um, whereas adding in that kind of extraneous 10 minutes, I felt like, oh, this is Groundhog Day as a slasher movie, and then like another thing taped onto it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, and it messed with my opinion of the movie walking out of it because I was like I
Mhm.
wasn't sure how to feel about that since the thing that I had the most mixed feelings about was the ending.
Mhm.
Um, and it was only after I thought about it and I thought about how much I enjoyed almost everything else about the movie that
Mhm.
I was like, oh no, yeah, no, it is a good.
Yeah.
Um,
All right. Do you have any final thoughts about the movie as a whole?
Go see it.
Yeah.
It's barring my really only semi jokey suggestion at the front of it because I think you really could do that. This seems like a pretty perfect date movie.
Mhm.
And there's a tradition of taking dates to see slasher movies, but this one already is. I'm being kind of sexist here, I suppose, but this really is kind of a chick flick
Mhm.
at heart. It just has some kind of fun violence in it,
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
a slightly out there premise. Um,
yeah. There is a definite cartoon-ish aspect to it. Like in particular, and again, Jessica Ralph sells that cartoonish aspect really well.
Absolutely. Um, yeah, it's a really sweet movie.
Mhm.
It's a really
It's
kind of adorable movie.
it's cute. It's not something that I think that there were a couple of moments that were genuinely tense or scary, but mostly it is just really lots of fun and having fun with like its premise, having fun with groundhogs or having fun with Groundhog's Day with slasher movies. It's just an all-around sort of fun movie, and again, I do think it's a perfect date movie because it's the kind of movie where like two people who are sort of getting to know each other can both agree upon a movie and like different aspects of it. Um,
Yeah, and again, it has a romance in it that, for me at least, really worked.
yeah,
Um,
I thought it worked as well. Um, but yeah, all right. So let's get to our final segment, best death. So who had the best death this? Well, actually, I shouldn't say who had the best death. Which
which was Best
which?
Death, right? Oh man, I didn't even think about this. Oh, I'm unprepared.
All right.
Let's
Well,
see.
I can go first. Uh,
Yeah, go
as much as I loved her getting hit with the bus, um,
ahead.
I
So
have
much it comes out of nowhere.
I have to go with the night vision goggle death. That where she is entirely in camo with her face painted in camo, holding the night vision goggles, watching the wife of the professor she's been sleeping with go to a party or something, and then just out of nowhere, the killer leaps on top of her and shoves her into a fountain and she drowns. I'm like, that was hilarious.
Um, let's from uh, I've had similar dilemmas before. From a thematic standpoint, I think it's her suicide,
Hmm.
which she does in order to save Carter.
Hmm.
I thought that was a really cool little bit of storytelling. It's not something that I'd seen before. Um, and it's kind of a perfect way to signify that character's growth, that they're willing to make literally the ultimate sacrifice
Hmm.
um, for somebody else. In terms of uh, uh, the enjoyment of watching it, probably her roommate's death,
Hmm.
because that's pretty spectacular.
Uh,
Getting shoved with 2 feet out of the window of a sorority house.
uh, yeah, I could definitely watch Tree kick her roommate out that window over and over and over again, and I probably will when it shows up on YouTube.
Yeah, well, it's one of many gifable moments in this movie, or gifable. Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
I can already picture it now when Bay gives you the wrong birthday gift,
yeah.
written in impact underneath it or on it. Uh, all right, so go out to to your local theater and watch this movie. Bye bye.
So long.